you need to be doing 80% of your work needs to be where you're in your genius zone. But more importantly, what's revenue driving for the business? So for me, that's meeting with clients, and that's meeting with leads that become clients, and networking, going to physical groups of women founders and leaders, doing workshops and speaking. Anytime I do a speaking gig, I get a flurry of new clients because they've seen my expertise on display, and there's trust built when someone's on stage. So, those things are really important for me to focus on. I can't be focused on repurposing content and posting and scheduling things to go out on social media or rescheduling with certain people, right? If I can outsource it, I need to be outsourcing it based on where my time's. Welcome to Side Note, the podcast, where we explore the intersection of business and intuition. I'm your host, Samantha Fackler, a Fortune 100 marketing advisor turned leadership coach who has worked with over 100 companies across 13 years and counting. And yes, I also keep crystals on my desk, I love astrology, and I'm a trained Reiki master. So I see the connections that other people miss. Join me for conversations that'll change how you think about business, life, and everything in between. Welcome to another episode of Side Note, the podcast. I am your host, Samantha Fackler, a business coach and marketing advisor. I have worked with over 100 companies over 13 years, and today we are getting into one of my favorite topics for founders and leaders, and that is hiring. So we're going to go over the hidden dynamics of strategic hiring and really how to build your dream team, because it's something that I've unlocked for my own business and it feels so good. It's like I've assembled this dream squad of amazing, talented people, and they all do things that I don't do well. They truly fill in the gaps and more. They bring their own magic. And I've built teams in the past for organizations, for marketing organizations, for, advising clients. I've worked with people as they organize or reorganize companies, teams that are in startups of 50 to 100, teams that are small, 5 to 10. And I find that the traditional hiring process is just flawed. It's broken. I worked at LinkedIn. I know how bad it is because I've been on the back end of what hiring looks like. There are a million resumes. There are people who are great at interviews because they can perform really well, but then when it comes to the task at hand, they can't pull through. I myself have been in organizations where there's been a bad hire and it didn't really fit culturally. So we're going to look at all of these things. And then how do you actually bring people into your organization that are just those gems? They're like total unicorns. They not only crush the task at hand, but they also are strategic, and they're also a cultural fit, and there's room for them to grow. Most importantly, it's what they love to do. You want to hire people who are really good at what they do and they love what they do, because you know that those people are going to stick around. They're going to want to grow with you, and you get to provide an organization and thriving culture that they can do that in. And it's something that I'm so passionate about. There was a brief moment where I experimented with career coaching, which is where I helped people figure out their next steps and their next job and where they wanted to move to. And I typically focused on leaders, so people who are in C-suite, execs, heads of marketing, who were like, I want to switch it up. I don't know how to go about this. For some reason, I've interviewed so much in my life. Whenever I went through an interview cycle, I would go hard. I would interview a lot. I would binge all the resources. So I have been on the other side of hiring too as a candidate, and watching people go through this, being at the LinkedIn level where I'm actually looking at data about how people find jobs, how people look for jobs, how many companies, have roles open for months and can't find someone. It is a broken process, but it doesn't have to be. It does not have to be broken. And it can be really fun. It can be easy. And I think it can be extremely simplified. And that allows you to find the people that are a good fit for you. We're going to be going over the 3 questions to ask that reveal more than a resume ever could. And we're also going to be looking at how do you use your intuition as a guide during this process, really leaning into the strategic advantage that provides you. Because let's be real, if you're not using your intuition in the hiring process, you are probably overlooking a lot of red flags. It's like the first time that I ever had a dating app and would just go on random dates. I did not filter as much as I should have. So we're going to be going over that as well, because your intuition is one of the most powerful and precise filters that will catch things that your logical brain and rational brain will not. We're also going to be talking about when to hire, because this is huge. I've had clients who get to a point where they're in a rush and they're like, we need to find someone for this thing like a week ago. And I'm like, okay, well, that means that we're several months behind in this hiring process, but that's okay. So we're going to talk about when to make certain hires and the mistakes that most founders make in the hiring process, because chances are, if you are a founder, you probably haven't been a recruiter or in HR before. So we're going to give you some tips so that you know what to do when you're looking for someone. And everything that we talk about in today's episode, I have done in my business. And I'm actually recording this today after kicking off with a new team member, which I'm very excited about. Her name's Carly, and she is helping me with my admin side, the admin side of my business. So calendar scheduling, rescheduling, organization, some systems, but really focused on the email and calendar piece. And that's something that when I first started my business, I was like, I don't know if I'll ever need that. I feel like I'm pretty good at that stuff. But my business has gotten to a point where when someone asks to reschedule, I feel it emotionally. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to go look at my calendar and figure this out. I'm not mad at that person, but I'm frustrated with this small additional weight that's put on my plate that's already very, very, very full. It's like when part of you like wants to have that extra dessert, but you're way over full and you regret it later. This is exactly the same thing, but with my bandwidth. So what I noticed, and luckily I already was bringing Carly onto my team when I started feeling this way. So I knew that I hired her at the perfect time because she's onboarded as of today and she can start owning these small areas of my business. You know, not too many hours. It's not like she's full-time. She's like 2 hours a week right now. I'm just being totally transparent because that's all I need for this type thing. But it opens up so much space in my world for working and so much headspace for me that I really need at this point because my business is moving fast. I have clients, there's demand, there's momentum. There's a lot of things going on between podcasts, marketing, clients, some other partnerships that I have, business to business. So when things are going really well, that's amazing, but you need to make sure that you have the team in place so you can handle everything and you don't lose your head. So this is very, very fresh for me because I left our onboarding call feeling so confident and so much lighter than I had before she came on and really before I started looking for a VA. So already I'm feeling like, okay, space just opened up in my calendar, in my life. I have someone that can hold these things. She's so on top of it, type A or, organization queen. You guys, I'm not. I'm going to be real with you. I'm more of a type B person. I like to go with the flow. Of course, I'm on top of things. I feel I'm very professional. I always have been, because of my background, but having her plug in, I'm seeing so many different things come out of it. I'm seeing, she really fills the gaps in more areas than one. This is work that she really likes to do. As she, in her words, she was like, this is like a puzzle for me. And I love that. And I, culturally, like it's a fit. I really enjoyed our conversation and I'm excited for her to meet other team members. And I'm really proud of my team. I also have Catrice, who's been amazing. She helps me with my marketing and she's highly, highly strategic, helping me structure things and plan for future programs. And then I have Danny, who works on my podcast, who is so fun to work with and has so many ideas and is constantly looking to improve her craft, as someone who helps with podcasts and helps people tell their stories. So I feel like I've assembled a really strong team around me and people that can work well together too. So let's look at how we can make that happen for you, because I know how much magic can be made when you have the right team around you and they're functioning well. But sometimes it takes a moment to get there, and it takes a leap of faith in order to even make your first hire. And I know I went through that process too. So let's take a step back and look at why most hiring processes fail. First off, We all know that funny little letter thing called a resume or a CV. And my main gripe with resumes are that they are like this past repository of things you've done, but it does not capture what the person really is interested in. What are the common threads that connect all their experiences that will continue to connect their future ones? It really doesn't show their task skills. And I think nowadays with AI and the way that people write resumes, it's like there's a lot of metrics in there that people will use, like, hey, I did this project and it increased this by 30%. And, you can't really fact check those. So a lot of people just throw that stuff in there because it looks good, but then can't speak to them. And then, traditional interviews reward performance skills, to be honest. I know I mentioned this in the intro, but I've interviewed people that are amazing at interviewing, not amazing at the job. And it's really hard to tell the difference because some people are going to be amazing at interviews because they're amazing for the job. And some people are going to be absolute shit at the interview process, but they kill it at the job. So how are you supposed to know the difference? And that's where some certain key questions and certain things later on in the hiring process become important. Another thing, really don't get me started on reference checks, because I understand why people historically have done reference checks, but it's like they're not going to give you someone that's going to tell you don't hire this person, or hey, I had this really tough experience with them. It's like asking your mom if you're pretty. Like, of course your mom's going to say you're pretty. So reference checks are pretty tough. I think it's up to you. I think it can be helpful to understand maybe certain things you didn't ask the interviewer themselves or the interviewee themselves. Like, hey, how would, someone like, I don't know, Giuseppe, it's a random name, but how would Giuseppe handle like a tough situation? Or, those types of questions might work well. And it might give you a little bit of information and might allow you to see, was this someone that was just performing? Are there weird dissonances between the reference check and the person? That's something that you can go on your own with, but I don't always do reference checks. It really depends on the person I'm hiring or the person I'm bringing on. Skills assessment tests. These are for technical roles, but I think they miss adaptability. Sometimes a technical test can be so rigid that someone could perform well, but then they don't perform well in the job when there's more variables at play. So something to take into account if you're hiring a technical role. And the last thing here, and probably one of the biggest things that you need to be aware of, is that most interviews don't account for team dynamics and energy fit. And culture is so important, even if it's just you and the other person, or you and two contractors and this new person you're bringing on. It gets even more important when you have a team of full-time people, because I've been a part of teams where someone has been hired and it wasn't an energy fit. And an example for this, I was a product marketer at the time, and I was on a marketing team. It was a startup. So there was a head of marketing, and then there was me. One of my best friends to this day, Claire, was a demand generation lead. There was a content marketer on the team, and we were looking for another person to bring on. Now, some context setting here. It's a startup. We were so scrappy. Like, I was just pounding away on Google Docs, figuring stuff out, doing random user interviews, trying to compile insights, doing positioning, writing, figuring out how we were going to launch our next product, walking 15 feet over to the head of product to sit next to him to look at the copy used in the software and like how we were going to like build off of that. Whatever, all this stuff. Our head of marketing decided to hire another product marketer. Now, from the outside, why the hell would you do that? There was not a huge gap with product marketing. It was that I was spread so thin across different things. And what needed to happen was a better audit of what are the gaps on our marketing team. If someone were to look at the gaps, they would actually see that we really needed like a marketing operations person to make sure that all our systems and processes within marketing and within the larger organization were sharp. Other gaps were a user researcher that was actually trained in research and could help us structure things, or bringing in contractors. We needed more copy to be written. Like, we were a high growth startup. We were well known. Well, it's Crunchbase. Like, that's the startup that I was at, like, well-known company. So when another product marketer came on board, what happened is that suddenly her and I, she was on a certain product and I was on another product. The thinking was that we would be focused on our own things. But what happened was that she could not get along with the rest of the marketing team, myself included. And I think that we all tried. I think we're all kind people, but something was amiss. Now, there are many different reasons that we could go into here, but ultimately, culturally, it was not a fit. So everyone on the marketing team and some other people in the organization really had difficulty working with her, even though she was a nice person. She was very smart. She actually came from a Fortune 500 company. She had very corporate ways of going about things. And then we were like, this is great, but we're a startup. We're moving so fast, so scrappy. So her ideas and things didn't quite fit how we were moving. And personality-wise, she didn't really try to get to know people. And at a startup like that, we all knew each other really well. We hung out, at lunch. We hung out on weekends occasionally and would get brunch together and get like kind of wasted over like huge bowls of, some sort of brunch drink. And we had a good time. Like, that was kind of the era of Silicon Valley startup life. But she really didn't want to be a part of it. And so then we kind of felt affronted. And we're like, well, I don't know, something's not gelling with this new hire. And she ended up leaving within 6 months. Now, that's super expensive for the company. It's also expensive for the team because then we have to go through another hiring process. A lot of time is required. A lot of work and time that she put in was lost because there was no one to keep it going, or it didn't go anywhere because it didn't fit the org. So, sometimes you can have a great, intelligent, kind person that has the greatest intentions in the world, but sometimes they just do not fit the culture of your organization or the organization itself. So that's where the hiring manager, or again, you bring in an advisor to help you see your blind spots. Because I wish someone told our head of marketing at the time, well, are you really sure that you need another product marketer? Are you sure that someone coming from a corporate company will be able to mesh and understand how a startup works? Because of course that candidate, she said, I want to work at a startup. I want to have more impact. And that's awesome. That's positive. No one is wrong in this situation. No one's a bad person. No one has ill will, but that fit is so important. So, okay, I want to talk about what actually predicts success. One is the ability to receive feedback and adapt. I was just coaching a client the other week who had made a hire, and that hire was not willing to adapt. And therefore, she could not continue with the organization because she just couldn't get with the program, so to speak. Two is values alignment. A lot of founders don't actually figure out their values until later on when they're a more mature organization. I think it's imperative for every company, no matter how small, to get your values on paper, even if they're just 3 to 5 things that are really important to you that they're not going to go anywhere. Make sure that your hires also have those values, because this will weed out personality matches. It is so fun when you meet someone and you get along personality-wise. Like, I have these conversations all the time where I'm like, oh my God, we could be best friends. But then that person might not actually have the same values in their work life. And it's not a bad thing. But if I have a value, let's say around radical honesty, and someone who I get along with, but really avoids conflict and doesn't like that, then that's going to be a problem. That's going to create some friction. So values alignment is going to predict success because they understand the program. Learning agility and growth mindset. Certain questions in the interview process can help you understand this. Like, hey, if there were new challenges in a project, how do you adapt to that? That's going to show you their ability to, adapt to different variables that come up in their work life. And if you're a founder, we have that in spades. There's going to be variables all the time, everywhere, always, always. Another thing that predicts success is task completion, patterns, and follow through. as well as emotional intelligence, especially under pressure. I cannot speak to these two things enough. For task completion patterns and follow through, I always recommend doing a test project. I have had everyone I hire do a test project of some sort. This means and I pay them for it. So I will say, hey, I would love to, if you could do this thing, I will compensate you this much. And then I wait and see how fast do they complete it. If I give them a certain amount of days or weeks, are they doing it by the deadline? I notice, how do they communicate to me that they completed it? How do they talk through their work? As well as follow up throughout the process. Are they emailing me within a reasonable amount of time, or are they lagging? There's so many different things that you can pick up outside of the direct conversation with candidates that will tell you about their working style and success down the road. And emotional intelligence, this is so important. I was talking to someone the other day, and he was saying that someone in his organization really was getting on someone publicly in a group meeting about something that he shouldn't have. Something that the CEO of that company did himself, but he was getting on this girl for it in a meeting and later had to apologize for her. And my friend was saying, yeah, he tends to kind of be antagonistic. And what I saw as a coach and advisor, there's some emotional stuff there, some emotional regulation that he doesn't have, or some emotional intelligence that's not coming through. So while he is a performer in the organization, he's actually creating toxic behaviors that are negatively impacting his team, which are negatively going to impact the organization. So picking up on emotional intelligence when you're chatting with people before you hire them, very, very important. Okay. So some things to keep in mind. Let's talk about the ecosystem first, right? How does one hire really change everything? Of course, you saw that example from Crunchbase, the girl that was hired that just didn't fit the culture. But I've noticed other things too. So I had a client recently who needed to hire a social media manager for her team. And she hired someone, but she had this gut feeling that something was off. And she noticed that this team member really wasn't very proactive about communication. She would get some stuff done. She kind of lagged on some other stuff, but she really just didn't pull through. That then put pressure on the girl that was between my client and the social media manager. I think her title was head of communications. That put pressure on the head of communications woman. It put pressure on the whole team when other people in the organization were saying, hey, what's up with our social media? So one bad hire can have drastic consequences. On the other side of the coin, one good hire can be amazing. I remember the first time I connected my designer and my podcast manager, and we were looking at the album artwork for Side Note. And the moment that I saw them communicating on Slack in our group thread about the album artwork, I was like, oh my God, I have a real business. I was so excited because I got to see the magic between them and see Danny's podcast genius come out. She's seen a ton of album artwork and she sees what works and what doesn't, what gets attention. And then, my designer, her genius, Steph's genius, come out, and she understands color and design and what catches the eye, what doesn't, what looks beautiful. And to see them figure it out between the two of them was I don't know. It was it was powerful. And I felt so good. And I felt really proud of the people that I've connected with and them connecting with each other. So it can be total magic when you get the right people in the right places. And again, I think for me, I like to identify the emotional intelligence piece. I like to identify, are they really filling a gap that I have? And then this is a light bulb key for everyone. Make sure that you hire strategic people. When you hire strategic people who are really good at their work stream, whatever they do, you are outsourcing your strategic thinking. And that is one of the best hires that you can make, because you cannot think strategically about every single work stream that you have in your company. No one's brain actually works out well, because that would require you to be an expert in every work stream of your company. That's not your job as a founder or a leader. Your job is to lead. Your job is to do what you do best and push the business forward. So I have made sure that everyone I've hired can think strategically. Steph, designer, thinks strategically about how design is used and what platform it's on. Danny thinks strategically about podcasts and titles and different ways that we publish each episode. Catrice thinks strategically about programs, how we roll them out, everything that is involved with. That means that they also know how to work together. So that is like a key piece. Highly strategic, high emotional intelligence, and then you're going to get a team that works well, like a machine. And again, there's this gut feel, there's this intuitive piece across all of this that makes sure that when you bring someone on, that they're also going to work well with the others. And sometimes, depending on the size of your organization, it's good to have them meet and see, hey, did you like your conversation with this person? Because that's going to tell you. You can't always predict if everyone's going to get along. So sometimes you can have people interview each other. Sometimes you're just going to have to roll the dice and go with your gut feel on it. The ripple effect of that is that your work, the output of all your teams, skyrockets. Oh my God, there are fireworks behind my head if you're watching this on YouTube. So, sorry, Danny, let me regroup. So a big part of this, kind of the missing link, if you haven't been able to spot it yet, is reading between the lines when you're hiring. Sometimes it's, yes, the cultural contribution, the energy alignment with the role and the team, but also the growth trajectory alignment with the company's needs. Can this person grow with you for years to come? Can you make this a really enjoyable environment for this person? Can you foster their learning and growth so that they become better and gain more expertise with what they're doing? This is really important, I think, for people. I think most people want to grow and change, and they want to find different challenges and growth edges. They don't want to just be a cog in a machine. They want to be treated like a human. And so remember this tagline, which is from actually the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute, where I got my certification from, but be a human with a human. When you're hiring people, these are real people, and treat them as such, and treat your own self as a human too. Sometimes we make hiring mistakes. Sometimes you have an amazing person on your team and then they leave, right? Recently I had that happen with Steph. Her life took a turn and, we kind of rolled back working with each other, and there's no ill will. It's very amicable. We're on good terms, but life took her down a different path. So understand that, be a human with a human. I feel like that should just be like a slogan that more people use. Another piece here in reading between the lines is the intuitive edge in hiring. A lot of people ignore it, and it's one of the most important things. Again, it's that filter that we don't always have. Your intuition is like an extra data point in hiring that you really need to consider. Like, if this candidate checks all the boxes and, their assignment that they did works really well and they totally blew me away and I feel like they're a cultural fit, check in. Does this feel really good? Are you really excited to bring this person on? Or do you have a reservation? Is there something that feels a little dull or like it's holding you back? Pay attention. Those red flags are like red flags in dating. If you do not pay attention to red flags in the interview process, same with dating, you're going to find yourself crying in a car 6 months later because something didn't pan out. I have also made that mistake myself. I have hired people and thought, okay, they can do the job. But there was something in my gut that said, I don't know if this person's going to stick around a while. And then sure enough, they didn't. And then what happens? I was crying in my car, or I was up at 3 a.m. wondering, how am I going to find someone else? I don't have the time now to find someone else. Now I have to go through the process all over. So pay attention. A great way to do this is to just do a little energy clearing before you meet with candidates. I like to just do some grounding work, take some deep breaths, feel my feet on the ground. Sometimes I'll go outside, so I'm not going from task to task to an interview. I've really cleared myself, walk around the neighborhood, a good old dog walk. So clear your energy before so that you come into interviews fresh. That will allow you to pick up on the gut feelings and the genuine intuitive insights that come up. Okay, what else do we have here? Let's talk about my hiring process. So this is when I figure out I need to hire someone. So often what I do quarterly is I look at my business and I see, okay, what am I actually doing? I do a little audit. Where is my time going? I had someone once tell me, you need to be doing 80% of your work needs to be where you're in your genius zone. But more importantly, what's revenue driving for the business? So for me, that's meeting with clients, and that's meeting with leads that become clients, and networking, going to physical groups of women founders and leaders, doing workshops and speaking. Anytime I do a speaking gig, I get a flurry of new clients because they've seen my expertise on display, and there's trust built when someone's on stage. So, those things are really important for me to focus on. I can't be focused on repurposing content and posting and scheduling things to go out on social media or rescheduling with certain people, right? If I can outsource it, I need to be outsourcing it based on where my time's going. So for this VA example that we've talked about with my new hire, Carly, love her, I started realizing that I was spending at least 2 hours a week scheduling and rescheduling people. Now, my plate has gotten to the point where I do not have 2 hours extra. And actually, I need those 2 hours back for other things that are more important and more revenue driving. I knew in January, I was going to feel more momentum in my business because I had speaking gigs coming up. I had teaching workshops coming up. I had launches coming up. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to get ahead of this. I already see that I'm spending this time and I shouldn't be spending time on this. So I started looking at someone to come on to just help me manage scheduling and rescheduling. Very few hours a week, right? And I find that the first hire for most founders, it doesn't have to be a part-time or full-time person. It can be someone coming in for a very small amount of time, just a little bit of budget. But once you feel that space that opens up from that person coming on, it's like, oh my gosh, I should have done this earlier. So I really encourage people to hire certain roles right before you really feel ready. It's going to feel like a leap of faith. But if you know strategically and intuitively that you need to bring this person on soon, you need to already be in the hiring process with potential candidates. So I knew I needed someone in terms of, first I got really clear on what I needed. Okay, I need someone to do all these tasks, and I wrote them down. I know they need to be aligned with my values. I wrote those down. I'm looking for someone within this budget, wrote that down. And then I started looking. So I love to go off referrals, especially for someone who's going to be in my email. There needs to be a high amount of trust because that person has a lot of access. So what I did from there is I looked at who has worked with people that I trust, who have businesses, and I was able to find her through a referral. Other ways I've gone about this in the past, I've just posted it on social media or my email newsletter. Hey, I'm looking for this person. If anyone in this community either is that person or knows someone, let me know. And then for that, I'll usually have a one-pager with all the things on it. What I'm paying, what I expect of them, values, more about my business, all that good stuff. What else here? Then I look at people that come through. I look at who they've worked with, portfolio. If they have some sort of social media, I look at that. I understand where they're located, time zones. I need to take that into account. That's really important depending on the role. And then I either start to meet with people or I start to do projects. So, hey, I'll pay you for this project. Usually I meet with people first. I really want a gut feel. Sometimes I will just do phone call interviews so that I'm not seeing the person because there is such a thing as pretty bias. And if someone is pretty to look at, or if people look like you will have a bias and implicitly trust them or think that they're more skilled. So a phone call interview is a great screener for that. So I like to do phone call screeners. If someone is coming through a referral, I'll just meet them on Zoom because I already know someone that's vouching for them. And then I'm blanking on the name. And then the assignment. The assignment, I think, is a crucial tool in the hiring process because it allows you to see, can this person do what they say they're going to do? Now, for some projects, like if I'm hiring a designer, I'm probably going to go off their portfolio and I might not have them do a test project. But for someone who's going to help me with, let's say, marketing, or if someone's going to be in charge of writing in my business, I need to see if they can write in my tone of voice, if they can speak to my audience, and how they're going to complete a task like that. Then I would put together a Google Doc with the assignment. I don't want anyone to do more work than 2 hours. I think most assignments can be done within that. Of course, if you're at a large organization, if it's a technical role, you might be doing a project that's 6 to 8 hours. Again, that makes more sense if it's a full-time role with full-time benefits. But for me, I'm not hiring full-time people quite yet. 2 hours is great. And then I figure out, okay, what makes sense compensation-wise? What would I be paying for this type of work, like within budget if I did hire this person? So that's often how I figure out how to pay them for that test assignment, because I don't believe in free work. I have paid my dues as a free intern in advertising, working at huge advertising agencies, 40 hours a week with no pay. And that sucks. And I don't believe anyone should do that. Pay for the projects. I also think quality people deserve to be paid. So, it also limits you from having a ton of people do test projects. That's also not a way to go about this. Do not do that. Select wisely. It's really the last step. It's like if you've gotten all the green flags from this person, then one of the last steps is for the test assignment. For Catrice, I have to talk about the test assignment with Catrice. So I think I asked her to do a sales page for a freebie. And I wanted to see if she could write in my tone, if she could speak to my audience, how, skilled was she at doing sales type language. She knocked it out of the park, you guys. I got a document back within the deadline that said, hey, you don't need a full scale sales page for a freebie because it's a freebie. So this is what I would do. And then she laid out exactly what she would do. She gave me the copy for a sales page anyways, because it's not like she was avoiding the task at hand. She still wrote copy, but I think she wrote copy for a paid offer of mine. So she was like, hey, for this freebie, I would put this on the sales page. This would be the email flow for it so that people take the freebie and then end up in an offer. And then this would be the offer sales page. So I still got what I was asking for, but she crushed it. She was like, hey, this is what you really need. And that showed me strategic intelligence. She was highly strategic and she was comfortable pushing back on me. And that's something that I look for in my team too. People that are not just going to be like, yes, ma'am, but they are able to say, hey, actually, I would think about it this way. Because they should be experts in what they do and you should not be an expert in it. Because if you are an expert in it, then that is where your business should be. But I'm not an expert in sales page funnels specifically, and she is. Again, outsourcing that strategic thinking means that your business is going to run so much better because people are going to say, hey, I would do it this way. And they are probably right. So that's a little anecdote for you. And of course, the intuition piece. I had this intuitive feeling about her and all the other people I've hired that they were going to really move the needle for my business. I was going to enjoy working for them. And I was able to create space for them to really be experts in what they do and to feel comfortable bringing that to the table. When it comes to mapping out all the gaps, I encourage people to bring in a third party. Talk to someone who's a couple steps ahead of you. Ask, hey, when did you hire XYZ, the people that you're thinking of bringing on? And ask, what did they find in the process? Because every role is going to be a little different. Designers have certain skills and ways of operating. Creatives tend to operate in a certain way. People that are more organization systems oriented are going to operate a certain way. So get some advice. Talk to some people who have been in the hiring chair before if you've never been in that seat. I'm going to pause and close the door. Okay, let's look at the 3 interview questions that will reveal, is this person really going to be able to fit in my organization and we all thrive together? Yay, sparkles, rainbows, stars. Okay, so 1, figure out how they handle pressure and difficult experiences. Ask, hey, when did something go wrong? If they can't speak to that, then they will not be able to work in the organization. And if they give you some positive spin that AI told them or some blog told them, then dig further. Well, what would you have done differently? Or what was the real challenge here? What was the emotional challenge in this? Those questions are going to be able to focus on that. How do they handle pressure piece? 2, ask a question around creative problem solving. So, how did they adapt? That's really what you're trying to understand. Can they stay agile? What was something where they had to change course in the middle of it? And what did they do? How did that affect them? How did they handle it? So this adaptability, creative problem solving approach is the second one. The third one is their energy management and boundaries. So when do they work? What really works for them? What doesn't work for them in their style of working? Do they want a lot of independence? Do they want a lot of direction? Knowing this is going to be key because it will determine how you work with them. And if you're someone who doesn't want to micromanage, then you need people who are independent. If you are someone who likes to micromanage, then you need to say that up front in your hiring process. So you need to be real with yourself too. People will show you who they are in their interviews. I interviewed someone and she was all over the place. She was a bit disheveled. She kept saying like, "Oh, sorry, like, we're in the middle of travel, blah, blah, blah." There were a lot of distractions on the call. And I just knew, even though this person could probably do the job, I think she's going to be like this in her role. And again, it's like dating. It's like people tell you who they are. You go on a date with a guy who's like, "Yeah, I've cheated on all my exes. It's something I'm working on." Well, don't be surprised if he maybe cheats on you too. While I believe everyone can evolve and heal and grow, sometimes people will tell you straight up who they are, and you need to listen and not just, ignore and keep walking when the red flags are glaring at you. So we've talked about a lot of things today. I think one last thing I want to mention is onboarding. I don't know why, but a lot of founders miss this. It's like they find a great person, they hire them, and then they don't provide proper onboarding. So make sure your stuff is documented and that you prepare to bring that person on so they feel really comfortable. They feel like you care about them joining your organization, and they feel really clear on the priorities of what they need to do first. It's great to keep in mind when you're hiring, like what this person will work on in the first 30 days, the first 60 days, the first 90 days, and then what might be on their plate recurring, right? What's a daily task or weekly task that they're going to own? And then think about, how are you going to measure success and check in with them? Because giving and receiving feedback is massive. You need to be able to give feedback to people early on. And you also need to make a call really fast if someone's not a fit. And if you do make a hire that for some reason didn't work out, fire fast. Let that person go. If you think about it more than a couple times, you've thought about it too much. So with that, let's go over the key insights really quickly before we close. 1, hiring is difficult. There's a lot of things involved. There's a lot to keep in mind, but know that the standard hiring processes aren't always correct. Really make sure that you're clear on what are the gaps in your business. Get ahead of it. Start hiring before you're fully ready, because by the time that person starts, you're going to be screaming for them to be working. You're like so excited and ready for them to hit the ground. 2, use a trial assignment to really understand how this person works and if they have that strategic brain that will fill the gaps. Consider how they're going to fit into your organization and culture. A good predictor of this is, have they worked in a similar environment as yours? Make sure their values aligned. Make sure that is upfront. Really ask key questions. Can they adapt to different circumstances? How do they handle pressure? Do they apply a creative problem-solving approach? And how do they draw boundaries with their work? What's their working style? What's their communication style? And does that fit with you? Other things to keep in mind: the intuitive edge. Do not ignore the little nudges that say, "Oh my gosh, bring this person on. I'm so excited." Or, "Ooh, I don't know. I have a reservation. I'm not sure about this." That is what's called a beige or red flag, and you should absolutely pay attention. Make sure that this person can also give you feedback and receive feedback too, that they are willing, again, to be adaptable with your organization. Make sure you ask those with that, if you feel like you really need an advisor to think about who you're hiring, being strategic and saving costly expenses that can come with bad hires, book a deep dive. They are one-time coaching calls. They are now 60 minutes, and if you feel like you need more support with the hiring process, book a deep dive with me. They are one-time coaching calls, and we can easily look at, what are the gaps? Let's look at, auditing where your energy is. What are the challenges that you're running into with hiring, with how you're allocating resources in your company? Again, it's one of my favorite things. And I've helped people with all different sizes of organizations. So I promise you, we can map out the dream team for you and how to get there. So with that, thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. Leave a comment if you're on Spotify or YouTube. I love seeing those. We also have a poll on Spotify, so check that out and cast your vote. Make sure you're following and subscribing the show. And with that, catch you later.